My name is Alexandra Price. I'm 32 years old, and I live with my 6-year-old son Luke in a small house in downtown Los Angeles. 6 months ago, my husband Daniel died in a car accident. His death didn't just take away the love of my life, it hollowed out the center of our home. The walls still stand, the furniture hasn't moved, but everything echoes differently now. Luke used to run into Daniel's arms every evening. Now he runs into mine. And I have to be enough. Every month I pay the mortgage on the house Daniel and I once stood in front of, hands intertwined, dreaming about a future with noisy dinners and backyard birthdays. My salary at the financial services firm downtown isn't bad, but when you're the only income, when you're raising a child alone, and when you're still sending money to your aging parents in Northern California, every dollar feels like it weighs a pound. Still, I never complained. Richard and Evelyn are old. Their pensions barely cover medication and house maintenance. Helping them felt like duty, like gratitude. Until the summer, everything broke. At the end of July, my manager informed me I had to attend a 3-day business trip to Sacramento. Mandatory. It was tied to a major contract I was leading, the kind that could secure my promotion. 3 days. That's all. But Luke's summer camp ended at 5. No overnight care, no last-minute sitter available. I tried every option. In the end, there was only one practical choice: my parents. When I called my mother, she answered on the second ring. I explained everything carefully, calmly, asking if they could watch Luke from Friday to Sunday. There was a pause. Then she cleared her throat. "All right, Alexandra," she said slowly, "but your father and I had a vacation planned. Plane tickets, hotels. It's been booked for months. We can postpone. For you." For you. I gripped the phone tighter. "However," she continued, "we hope you can help cover some of the cancellation costs, just to be fair." Fair. I had been sending them money every month, quietly adjusting my grocery budget, skipping small comforts. "How much?" I asked. "About 3,000. She said it too quickly, like she had rehearsed it. For a moment, I nearly said no. But then I pictured Luke's small fingers curling around mine, his soft voice asking if Mommy would come back. "I'll transfer it tonight," I said. After I hung up, I sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. I didn't feel anger, just something colder. On Friday morning, I packed Luke's backpack. 2 outfits. His favorite picture books. The old stuffed bear Daniel gave him before his first birthday. The drive north was quiet. The California sun burned the freeway white. When we pulled into my parents' neighborhood, my mother was already standing on the porch. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Luke ran into her arms. As I stepped out of the car, the neighbor's gate creaked open. Lucy Graham. She had known me since I was 18, the kind of woman who kept spare keys and fresh lemonade ready. "Alexandra," she called gently, "back for a visit?" "Just dropping Luke off for a few days." Her eyes shifted to my parents. "Are they watching him the whole time?" There was something in her voice. Hesitation. I forced a smile. "It's just 3 days." Lucy nodded slowly. "If you need anything," she said softly, bending down to Luke's level, "you can always come over to Miss Lucy's house." I felt that flicker of unease again, but I pushed it down. Before leaving, I knelt and hugged Luke tightly. "Mommy will come back Sunday night," I whispered. He pressed his face into my shoulder. "Promise?" "Promise." As I drove away, I looked back in the mirror. Luke was waving. Lucy stood beside him, watching. And for a second, just a second, I wondered if I had made a mistake. But I told myself what I always did. It's only 3 days. 3 days. What could possibly go wrong? The first day in Sacramento went smoother than I expected. Meetings, numbers, smiles that never reached anyone's eyes, handshakes that felt like contracts that even before the ink existed. By the time I got back to the hotel that night, my heels were killing me and my brain felt like it had been wrung dry. Still, the first thing I did was call home. My mother picked up on the second ring again, but her voice sounded hurried, like I'd interrupted something. "Everything okay?" I asked. Fine," she said, and I heard the faint clink of dishes, the rustle of something being moved. "Luke, phone!" A moment later, Luke's voice filled my ear, small, warm, and soft in a way that made my throat tighten. "Mommy," he whispered like he wasn't sure I was real. "I'm here, baby. How are you?" "I miss you," he said immediately. Then, like he remembered he was supposed to be brave, he added, "But I'm okay." That sentence almost broke me. We talked for a few minutes. Luke told me Grandpa took him into the backyard to pick flowers and acorns. He sounded normal, a little sleepy, a little homesick, but safe. In the background, I heard my mother say something sharp, too low to catch, and Luke's voice dipped. Okay, he whispered again, like he was trying not to be trouble. I swallowed the tightness in my chest. Listen to Grandma. Go to bed early. I'll be there Sunday night, okay? Okay, he said, quieter now. Love you. I love you more. My mother took the phone back. All right, Alexandra, we're busy. Good night. The line went dead before I could even finish my goodbye. I stared at my phone for a long moment, the silence in the hotel room pressing in around me. I told myself it was nothing. Old people got tired. They didn't like disruptions. They weren't warm. But they were still his grandparents. I needed them to be. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up with that same tight feeling in my chest, the one that didn't loosen even after a shower. Before I walked into the day's meetings, I called again. The phone rang 5 times before someone picked up. My father. His voice was rough and irritated, like I'd dragged him out of sleep. Luke's fine, he snapped before I even spoke. Focus on your work. Don't bother us. Dad, can I just talk to him for a second? He's busy. Busy. At 6 years old. Then the line went dead. I stood in the hallway outside the conference room, holding my phone like it might suddenly turn into something else. My palm was damp. My heartbeat felt too loud. A thought stabbed at me. What if they're not watching him the way they promised? I tried to smother it. I had a room full of executives waiting, a contract on the line, a promotion that could change Luke's life. I shoved my phone into my bag, turned off the ringer completely, and walked into the conference room like a woman who still believed she had control. That day didn't just blur, it swallowed me. Presentation after presentation, numbers sliding across giant screens, new objections, new revisions. Every time we thought we were done, another issue surfaced, dragging us deeper. By late afternoon, the sky outside had darkened. By evening, the air conditioning in the room felt like ice. At 9 p.m., someone finally slid a tray of cold sandwiches onto the table like an afterthought, and we kept talking between bites like machines. When the meeting finally ended, it was nearly 10. I was exhausted in a way that made my bones ache. Back in my hotel room, I kicked off my shoes and headed straight for the bed. Then Luke's face flashed in my mind. I turned back, pulled out my phone, and powered it on. The screen lit up, and everything inside me went cold. 23 missed calls, all from the same number. Lucy. My throat tightened instantly. My fingers went numb. I hit call back so fast I almost dropped the phone. It rang once, twice. Before it connected, another call came through. Unknown number. My heart slammed against my ribs. I answered. A man's voice came through. Firm, controlled, too calm for the kind of fear already flooding my body. Is this Alexandra Price? Yes, I managed, my voice thin. Yes, this is her. This is Officer Jackson with the local police department, he said. You need to return immediately. Your son Luke has been involved in a serious incident. For a second, my mind went blank, like someone had reached in and turned off the lights. My son, I whispered. My mouth tasted like metal. How is he? Officer Jackson's voice stayed steady, but it didn't soften. A neighbor, Miss Lucy Graham, called the police around 8 p.m. after hearing a child crying for several hours. When officers arrived and got no response at the door, we forced entry. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles hurt. We found Luke alone, he continued, in severe distress. There was heavy rain. He sustained a broken arm attempting to climb out of a bedroom window. The room spun. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. He's currently being treated at the local hospital, Officer Jackson said. His condition is stable, but a legal guardian is required immediately. I'm coming, I choked out. I'm coming right now. I didn't remember hanging up. I didn't remember grabbing my keys. I only remember the sound of the hotel room door slamming behind me and the elevator taking too long. In the parking lot, my hands shook so violently I almost couldn't get the key into the ignition. I called my parents. Ring, ring. No answer. Again. Ring, ring. Nothing. I called until my finger cramped. Until I realized, in the pit of my stomach, that they weren't just ignoring me. They weren't there. I drove like a woman possessed. The freeway was slick, the night air thick with heat, and then suddenly, hours later, as I neared the small town, rain. Real rain. Sheets of it. Like the sky itself was angry. Around 3 a.m., I pulled into the hospital parking lot. The rain hit my windshield so hard it sounded like fists. I threw the car into park and ran. Inside, fluorescent lights made everything look pale and unreal. A night nurse looked up as I approached. Alexandra Price? She asked. I nodded, panting, barely able to stand upright. Room 204, she said, her voice softening. He's stable. Someone's waiting with him. I didn't thank her. I couldn't. My legs carried me down the hallway like they weren't mine. When I pushed open the door to room 204, I stopped. Luke was on the bed, his little face chalk white. His arm was wrapped in a cast and held in a sling that looked too big for him. His lashes trembled like he'd been crying even in his sleep. And sitting beside him, hunched over, hands clasped like she was praying. Lucy. She looked up at me, her eyes swollen and red behind her glasses. The second I saw Luca like that, something inside me broke clean in half. I rushed to the bed and dropped to my knees. Baby, my voice cracked. Luke's eyes fluttered open. For a second, he looked confused. Then he saw me. Mommy, he whispered. That one word shattered me. I leaned over and wrapped my arms around him as carefully as I could, terrified of hurting his arm, terrified of hurting him more than he already was. I'm here, I sobbed into his hair. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Luke tried to lift his good hand and pressed it against my shoulder, like he was holding on to me with everything he had left. His little body shook with silent sobs, and I sat there holding him, feeling the full weight of my mistake crush down on my chest. When his breathing finally slowed, when he drifted back into exhausted sleep, I lifted my head and looked at Lucy. You called, I whispered, voice raw. You saved him. Lucy nodded, her hands trembling. It was pouring, she said, her voice unsteady. I heard him crying. I called your parents over and over. No one answered. I went to the door. No lights, nothing. I waited as long as I could, Alexandra. But his crying, it got weaker. She swallowed hard. I couldn't stand it anymore, she said. So I called the police. I stared at her like she was the only solid thing left in the world. Thank you, I whispered. Lucy's lips pressed together. She didn't look proud. She looked sick. Then I forced the next question out, because I needed the truth even if it killed me. My parents, I said slowly. Where are they? Lucy shook her head. They weren't home, she said. When the police broke in, the house was empty. They didn't come to the hospital. Not a word. Not a sign. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. Empty. Not confused. Not asleep. Not overwhelmed. Empty. I looked back at Luke, my child, my whole world. His small arm trapped in plaster because the adults who were supposed to protect him had disappeared. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not just grief. Not just rage. Something sharper. Something that didn't shake. Because now I knew one thing for sure. Whatever my parents had chosen, I wasn't going to let them walk away from it. That morning, after Luke was moved to a recovery room and finally asleep under the haze of pain medication, Officer Jackson returned. We sat in a quiet waiting area. Pale sunlight filtered through the thick hospital glass, turning the floor into a dull reflection of everything I had failed to protect. He placed a thin file folder on the table between us. Ms. Price, he began evenly, CPS has officially opened a case. Based on the evidence and Luke's condition when he was found, the recommendation includes a financial penalty, probation, and a permanent no-contact order regarding your son. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the folder. You also have the right to request harsher prosecution, he added. We'll support that if you choose. For a long moment, I saw two versions of myself, one that burned everything to the ground, and one that walked away. In my mind, Luke's tearful whisper echoed again. Mommy. That won't be necessary, I said quietly. Just do what you need to do. My voice sounded calm, detached. Then I added, and it felt like slicing through the last living nerve inside me. From now on, my son has no grandparents. Officer Jackson nodded once. No pity, no judgment, just acknowledgement. After he left, Lucy approached slowly. I heard from neighbors, she said gently. They left that morning. Suitcases, around noon. Suitcases, while my son cried alone in the dark. That word settled into me like ice. I stepped into the hallway, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. There it was, the secondary credit card I'd given my parents years ago for emergencies. Plane tickets, hotel charges, restaurant bills, all processed within the last 24 hours. My thumb hovered for only a second. Then I canceled the card. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. What the hell are you doing, Alexandra? She snapped immediately. Why did you cancel the card? We're still on our tour. I leaned against the cold hospital wall. Luke has a broken arm, I said evenly. He tried to climb out of a window in the rain. He could have died. Silence. Then rushing words. We hired a babysitter. It's not our fault he's sensitive. We left snacks and milk. He just had to stay inside. Her excuses sounded rehearsed, hollow. If you hired someone, I asked quietly, why didn't anyone see them? Why was he alone for hours? She didn't answer. Instead, she shifted. You overreacted? Calling the police? Dragging us into this? My fingers tightened around the phone. No, I corrected her. Lucy called the police because you weren't there. Heavy breathing filled the line. Then I said the words that had been building since that night. From now on, Luke and I have nothing to do with you. You ungrateful! I hung up. The hallway went silent. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just final. We returned to Los Angeles 2 days later. Luke slept in the back seat the entire drive, his cast resting awkwardly against a pillow. When we pulled into our driveway, the house looked the same. But I didn't feel the same stepping inside it. After settling Luke on the sofa, I opened my laptop. The email from my company was waiting. Subject line, notice of contract breach. Compensation demand. I already knew. Because I had left. Because I chose my son over a room full of executives. The contract was worth over $5 million. And now they were demanding partial damages. $370,000. The numbers stared at me like a threat. $380,000. More than I'd ever owned. Enough to force me to sell this house. The house Daniel and I built our dreams in. For a second, grief for him mixed with everything else. His laugh, his hand in mine. The way he used to say, we'll handle it together. Now it was just me. I closed the laptop gently. If I had to lose the house to keep Luke safe, I would. There wasn't even a question. 2 days later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something inside me said answer. Alexandra Price? A woman's voice asked. Yes. This is Amy Walker with Child Safety Watch. We're preparing a report on a recent child abandonment case. We'd like to hear your side. My first instinct was to refuse. I didn't want Luke's pain dissected, but then I imagined the alternative. Silence. Another quiet story buried under polite shame. I'll speak, I said slowly, but no photos of my son, no interviews with him. The story is mine. I promise, she replied. The article was published 2 days later. It didn't exaggerate. It didn't dramatize. It simply told the truth. A 6-year-old boy, alone, in the rain, and a mother who chose him over everything else. The response was immediate. Supportive, angry on Luke's behalf, sympathetic toward our situation. Then my company called. Emergency meeting. 10 a.m. I printed my resignation letter before leaving the house. Just in case. Luke insisted on coming with me. He didn't ask why. He just held my hand. When we stepped onto the 7th floor, conversations stopped. Eyes followed us. A woman in a tailored suit, and a small boy with a cast. Inside the conference room sat the head of HR, the legal representative, and Vice President Ramirez. I helped Luke into a chair beside me and kept holding his hand. Ms. Price, Mr. Ramirez began calmly, we've reviewed the situation regarding contract 3478. I nodded, ready for impact. He slid a printed copy of the article toward me. In light of the extraordinary circumstances, he continued, and after discussions with the client, the company will not pursue damages. I froze. We also hope you'll continue your work with us, he added, and please take whatever time you need. For the first time in weeks, my chest expanded fully. I squeezed Luke's hand. He looked up at me, confused but smiling. When we walked out of that building, I picked him up with my free arm. The sunlight felt different on my skin. Lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because something heavy had been lifted. The court hearing was scheduled, and I knew that part wasn't over yet. But one thing was clear now. I had chosen correctly, even if it cost me everything. A little over 2 months later, the court issued its final ruling. I received the notification by email on a quiet autumn morning while Luke was still asleep upstairs. The judge ordered my parents to pay $3,000 in court fees and nearly $12,000 in medical expenses for Luke's treatment. More importantly, a permanent no-contact order was granted, effective immediately. I read the email twice, not because I was savoring it, but because I wanted to be sure it was real. When I closed my laptop, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. Just completion. Like a door had finally shut behind me. But I should have known my mother would never let silence be the last word. That afternoon, while Luke and I were assembling a new bookshelf in the living room, his idea, because he said his stuffed bear needed more space for friends, my phone rang. Her name flashed across the screen. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I answered. "Are you satisfied now, Alexandra?" she demanded immediately. "You dragged your own family into court. You humiliated us in front of everyone." Her voice hadn't changed. Still sharp. Still centered entirely on herself. I leaned back against the wall, watching Luke carefully screw in a bolt with his good hand, tongue sticking out in concentration. "You chose this," I said calmly. "You could have handled it privately," she shot back. "We're your parents." My jaw tightened. "And he's my son." There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "You've always been dramatic, blowing things out of proportion." The rain that night flashed in my mind. Luke's broken arm. The empty house. "You left him alone," I said quietly, "in a storm." She didn't apologize. Not once. Instead, she kept talking about embarrassment, about neighbors gossiping, about how people were looking at them differently now. I realized something then. She still didn't understand what she had done, and she never would. I'm blocking this number, I said evenly. Do not call again. You ungrateful! I ended the call. Blocked her. Blocked my father. Blocked every possible path back to us. Then I walked back to Luke. He looked up at me and grinned. Mommy, look, it stands. The bookshelf wobbled slightly, but it stood. Perfect, I said, kneeling beside him. And in that small moment, I felt more certain than ever. We didn't need anyone else to build something steady. Life didn't transform overnight. Healing never does. Luke wore his brace for 6 weeks. Every evening after dinner, I took him into the backyard and gently tossed a soft foam ball back and forth so he could regain strength. Sometimes he would wince. Sometimes he would laugh. I counted both as progress. One weekend morning, he stood by the kitchen window and pointed toward the empty corner of our yard. Mom, he said thoughtfully, let's plant a tree. A tree? A big one, he nodded. So when I'm older, we can build a treehouse. His certainty made me smile. That afternoon, we drove to the hardware store and picked out a young red maple. It barely reached my knees. Its leaves were small and bright. Luke insisted on pushing the cart himself. At home, we dug a hole together under the open sky. The soil was darker than I expected. Damp, rich. We lowered the fragile trunk into the earth carefully. As we packed the soil back in, Luke pressed his palm against the thin bark. It'll grow, he said confidently. Yes, I replied softly. It will. As the early breeze brushed against the small leaves, I felt something inside me settle. Not everything that breaks stays broken. Some things just grow differently. 3 months after the court ruling, I was sorting through old paperwork at the kitchen table while Luke dozed on the sofa beside me. My phone vibrated. Lucy Graham. I smiled automatically and answered, Hi, Miss Lucy. But the voice on the other end wasn't hers. It was trembling. Urgent. Alexandra, it's Mom. My stomach dropped. She must have used Lucy's phone. Your father, she sobbed. He's very sick. We need money for treatment. Please, can you help? The words hung in the air. For a split second, the old reflex tried to rise. The daughter. The guilt. The responsibility. Then another image replaced it. Luke's pale face. His cast. His whisper in the hospital. I closed my eyes. My parents have been gone for a long time, I said evenly. You have the wrong number. Her sobs cracked through the line. But I didn't let them in. I ended the call. And this time I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Some wounds don't heal if you keep reopening them. Some ties, if not cut cleanly, will keep tightening until you can't breathe. That night, after Luke fell asleep, I stepped outside into the backyard. The red maple swayed gently under the porch light. Small, fragile, but rooted. I stood there for a long time looking at it. And I realized something. I didn't drag my family into court. They walked themselves there. I didn't break anything. I protected what mattered most. If loving my son fiercely meant losing the people who raised me, then I would choose him. Every single time.